I was 10 years old, I asked my mum for a fancy dress birthday party. I was so excited. 2 days before my birthday, my best friend took me aside and she looked at me earnestly. It was the first time anyone had looked at me earnestly. And she said, "Alice, I'm worried. Your mum showed me a birthday present." Now, my best friend knew me pretty well, so when she said this to me, my heart dropped. There was really only one thing it could be, one thing that would drive my best friend to earnestness. And that was a dress. And not just any dress, folks, a princess dress. The night of my birthday arrived and I knew I faced a decision. Play it cool or tell my mum the truth. My name is Hannon. I am a comedy performer and communications professional. I don't know what that is either. I'm a very average rugby player. I'm embarrassingly incapable of singing. I love cats. And I also identify as queer. I identify as non-binary. Now, I am conscious that the word queer for some of you may seem a little pejorative. I want to reassure you it is a word that's been reclaimed from that context and is now used as a sort of all-encompassing term for the wonderful spectrum of gender and sexuality that exists in the world, the one on which so many of us sit. My non-binary identity sits under this umbrella of queerness. Now, did you know that more people believe in unicorns than they do in non-binary people? That's fake news, sorry. But it could be true, right? I mean, honestly, I live in a world where the vast majority of people don't believe I exist. I mean, how could I exist? How could anyone exist out of the clearly defined roles of man or woman, girl or boy? It's just not possible. Well, it is, because I'm here. And when we're not giving TEDx talks, you can find us in Brighton, eating vegan food, talking about cute patterned shirts, and how awesome Caroline Lucas is. She is. The language of sex and gender is constantly evolving. Even I can barely keep up. My only advice to you on this basis is to keep listening. I am one voice. There are a myriad of resources out there, and I ask you to go out and seek other queer and trans voices. They are diverse and fascinating. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about gender, how it can limit us, but how a small change in the way that you think could transform the way you view the world forever. And I want to give you a gift. Yay! So, after all of that, all those bombs there for you, I see the world in a very different way, I think, to the majority of people. As I see it, sex and gender are frequently conflated. As we are born, we scream our arrival, and a medical professional picks us up, slaps us on the behind. Does that still happen? I don't know. And hands us to our parents and informs them not of our sex, but assigns us a gender. Both seemingly imply the other. It is accepted that in that moment, that doctor will lay down the rules to which that little human bundle will adhere to for the rest of its life. Any deviation from which will result in correction, shame, and depression. To better reflect the true differences between sex and gender, a birth might need to look a bit like this. I'm going to do a doctor voice, so bear with me. Good afternoon. Congratulations on your human child. From the outside, it looks like it has female reproductive organs. As for its gender identity, well, at the moment it doesn't yet know it exists, so... And its gender expression, well, you probably observed already, all it can do is poop and scream, and both boys and girls like to poop and scream. Well, you get my drift, right? So sex is sex, it's male, it's female, and it's intersex. And interestingly, equal numbers of red-headed people are born as intersex people. So don't tell me that sex is binary, because it isn't. Gender identity is who I feel I am. You may feel deeply male, you may feel deeply female. I feel deeply neither, thus non-binary. We do need a sexier word, I agree. And lastly is gender expression, and that's how I show the world who I am, and it is what I am mostly going to be talking about today. And it's an interesting one, right? But whilst I'm privileged enough to have a voice, to be able to present in the way that I do, to express myself out of the confines of male or female, not everyone is. And this isn't about how we feel about having a right to express ourselves, it goes deeper than that. Gender binary rules of engagement can be beautiful. Strictly Come Dancing. But they can also be catastrophic. I was rudely extracted from my Brighton bubble through my hobby as a teacher of improvisation. As you've just seen, yay, Sean Girlies! Improvisation is the art of creating scenes and characters from the smallest stimuli, tiny seeds of ideas. It creates wonderful, compelling, authentic comedy and is wonderful sport for performers. It can also help people build their confidence, find their voice, and rediscover their playfulness. Above all else, though, it relies on one foundation, one critical, vulnerable foundation, that of acceptance. Acceptance is the pathway to truly potential realizing performance. In improv, we are programmed to accept a scene, a person, a character in the space that we're in. We would never, ever reject them, otherwise the scene would stop, end at best. It would be deathly boring at worst, which is the ultimate crime. All right, yes. Okay, so I encourage people to accept what's around them. I've been in therapy long enough to know that's not a coincidence. It's expensive as well. But it turns out that there's a serious gender problem with improv, which was elegantly and poetically reflecting real life. My fellow improvisers were telling me something important and I wasn't listening. I was ignoring something that was becoming unavoidable and inescapable. Improvisers were telling me that mixed gender improvisation groups made them feel really uncomfortable, that boundaries were transgressed and they were ending up in scenes that felt non-consensual, overly sexual and silencing. My feminine expressing friends were angry, frustrated and sad. For a while I'd just been delighted that people felt safe with me, that my queer spaces made them feel comfortable. But just like so many things, like catcalling in the street, my masculine gender expression was giving me a free pass out of the entrenched gender power play in improv. I was experiencing male privilege and I didn't even know it. I couldn't work it out to begin with. Under the tenets of improv, trust, accept, and build, this stuff should not be happening. What was going on? So I took it upon myself to observe as much as I could. I played and watched mixed gender groups, and I started to see a pattern emerge. Something excruciatingly simple, but very, very important. In mixed gender groups, I realized that men almost exclusively played men, and women almost exclusively played women. Players did not feel comfortable playing off gender, but why? Because like 2 minutes ago you were playing a wardrobe and now you're playing a 4-year-old Victorian orphan. You can play something you're not, obviously, but it turns out we feel really embarrassed to play off gender. It feels weird, like we're breaking the rules somehow. So to unpick and create a character is to unpick what it is to be human. So why is it so difficult to drop your gender? When I teach improv, I talk about a tool belt. And in that tool belt, you have all of the wonderful elements of scene and character that you can use in a near infinite number of combinations to create a performance. Accents, status, subtext, objects, physicality, the list goes on. Why can't we then put gender back in our belt and play something differently? I was blinded by my own bias. I did not have the emotional attachment to gender that so many people do, so I thought it must be a case of some bad improv eggs, bad teachers even. But I was wrong. For many, gender is their foremost character trait, one which they find it incredibly difficult or shameful to leave in their tool belt. There is so much shame in not performing your gender well, people are terrified. There are so many examples of this in real life. The Me Too campaign has only recently shown us the dark side of entrenched gender weirdness. We hear, boys will be boys, girls, put it away. Men are socialized to exert their power, status, and physicality. I know this, you know this. Men, in my life, I have lost to so many forms of violence. Men are 3 times more likely to take their own life than women, with suicide the biggest killer of men under 45, all in the name of masculinity. I will not accept that having a Y chromosome makes you more inherently depressed or violent. It must be something else. Why are people choosing to perform their gender over their own and others' safety? This is a crisis of masculinity, not a crisis of having male genitalia. This is a crisis of gender performance. But if we want people to drop problematic gender performance, we have to give them permission to do so, because the shame of not performing your assigned gender is overwhelming. The painful tragedy here is that we made this stuff up. Someone somewhere made this stuff up and decided there are 2 ways to play your gender. And now we measure ourselves by them. We decide what school someone goes to, where they wee, and what toys they play with. Imagine for a moment if we did that with any other part of society. Look all around you where gender is aggressively reinforced. Gender dictates how we judge ourselves and others. We police gender. We are trained from birth to pick up on the most minor transgressions. We feel instantly ill at ease. We reject it, its wrongness, its sourness. We are repulsed, but we are fascinated, excited even. No wonder it's so hard to drop. As I sit on a train in my 3-piece suit, putting on just a little bit of blusher to counter the vicious fluorescent lights and long day at the office, I see the side eyes from strangers, speculating as to why that girl dares to transgress the correct gender performance by putting on a suit or putting on makeup. I feel it every time I stand between the doors of the men's and the women's loos. I get accused of playing the wrong character all the time. And you know what? These characteristics have very little to do with your sex. They are just a package of behaviours that we have assigned a name. Masculinity is one package and femininity is another. They are not tools in and of themselves, they are simply a combination of several tools. Status, physicality, subtext. Why limit ourselves to 2 options? This is ludicrous in improv, and it's certainly ludicrous in life. Have you ever chosen not to say or do something because you feel it would make you less of a man or less of a woman? Have you ever performed your gender despite the unintended harmful consequences of doing so? Look all around you where gender is aggressively reinforced. Let me pry apart your masculinity from your maleness, your femininity from your femaleness. I promise it won't hurt. And then, rather than restricting us, they can become ways of maximizing ourselves in life and in performance. And I believe that if people in those improv spaces could put down their gender and play across the spectrum of what makes up gender, those improv spaces would feel safer. I see that in my queer spaces every week. I'd be surprised if the same wasn't also true for society. What I've seen and what I know is that people want to belong. They want meaningful connection with the people who accept them for who they truly are, even when they put on a character to please others. Gender presents us with our first club, our first team, and our first identity, and it's a compelling one, with clear terms and rules of engagement. No wonder we keep using it, even when it stops working for us. But I believe that gender can be malleable, fluid and flexible. And by the way, if we deconstruct the gender binary, we annihilate sexuality as we know it. But that's another talk for another day, don't worry. If you are sure of yourself, adamant in your masculinity, adamant in your femininity, and those rigid, strict criteria empower you to live your life to your full potential, then I politely bow, or curtsy, in your direction. If you, however, have ever felt held back, threatened, or inhibited by the rigid expectations of your side of the gender binary, then we stand together. We stand together in our need to step outside of its confines. It has already begun. The choices we have in front of us, we have never had before. We are deconstructing gender all the time, and the lines are ever fading, and I believe that we are a better, more generous society for it. What I am saying to you today is nothing new. All I am doing is asking you to accept it and build it into the way that you treat yourself and others. Look at gender for what it is, a performance, a way of communicating the many aspects of who you are. It is not who you are. I ask you all to take with you today the tenets of accept and build. And if you see someone, when you see someone who performs gender differently to how you expect and you feel ashamed, ask yourself, is that their shame or is it my shame? And in the same breath, give yourself permission to perform your gender however you choose. To improvisers, I ask you, could you be more inventive, inclusive and diverse in the way that you use gender in performance? To those of you silly enough not to do improv, perhaps you might want to consider the same. So let me take you back to that scene I set all those moments ago. I'm sure you're wondering how it all ended. You'll remember I had a dilemma. Perform the gender my mum expected or tell her the truth. That wearing dresses made me feel wrong, strange and sad. How did I know at 10 years old that this was the wrong way for me to perform my gender? I felt it here. Right here, that gut twist, that physiological wrench of an uncomfortable feeling. It's the same one you feel sometimes when you do or say something that isn't congruent with who you truly are, when you feel shame. I put on that dress for my mum because I knew it would make her sad if I didn't. I sat in our 1970s coral bathroom and I cried. I cried because I was ashamed. I cried because I wanted to be a cowboy. My best friend knocked on the door, looked at me and went and fetched my mum. My mum came running and gave me the biggest hug I've ever had, and I told her I was sorry, and she told me quite adamantly that I was not to be. She then, my mother, my dear wonderful mother, cobbled together the finest cowboy outfit you've ever seen. In that moment, my mother gave me the greatest gift I have ever received. That gift I've been talking about all along, the gift of acceptance in the face of excruciating vulnerability. In that moment, my mother saw beyond her need for me to exist in a world of girl or boy, man or woman. She gave me permission to be myself, wholly, to put girl back in my tool belt. So here I stand, existing outside of the binary, and it all began in that moment. I get to teach, work, perform and play with the most extraordinary people and help them realize their potential. The greatest gift a person can give, my mum gave me, the gift of acceptance. And in so she built the person you see before you. And it is a gift I have committed since to pass on. Thank you.